Hi, welcome to the DataKitchen demo that focuses on intra-team coordination. My name is Chris Berg and I'll be your demo person today. So this is really meant to be the middle part of a demo. So we're assuming that the part 1 and part 2 that you can see on my screen, that people have at least spent that hour learning about what recipes are, what kitchens are, and getting the idea of DataOps, how testing and of recipes, how we orchestrate multiple tools, and then how we deploy changes to recipes. Part 4 of the demo that we're also not doing is how do you coordinate between teams that are in different locations, inter-team coordination. But in this case, we're actually focusing on within the team. And then part 5, management, is how you, what metrics can DataOps offer you to be able to manage your team successfully. So we're going to focus on how does your team work together? And let's start with thinking about what a team is in analytics. And so in a lot of organizations, there's a variety of roles. And starting at the top, there's someone who's usually in charge of production. In this case, we're calling him Eric, and he's the production perfectionist. His role in life is to sort of protect and perfect the daily grind of production. He wants to minimize errors. He doesn't want to have people call up and say things are late, things are wrong. He's got to deal with server errors and security issues, and he just wants things to run like clockwork. And his skills are really, he's a taskmaster. He can do a little bit of everything. He can do some system admin and some coding, but he's really the production perfectionist. And then at the very bottom, there's someone called a data engineer, and oddly enough, they're named NoProd. And they're a data doer. And they could be in this a data scientist or a business analyst or a number of roles, or there could be multiple ones. But their kind of goal in life is to create cool features with analytics for customers. So in this case, her skills are SQL, ETL tools, databases. They want to make customers successful, want to have a cool data architecture. And then we're going to introduce a new person in the middle called the DataOps engineer. And think of them as an operations optimizer. And their goal is to kind of set up and maintain development environments and really speed and ease deployment of features from people like NoProd or data scientists in the bottom to the production perfectionist. And their skills are kind of DevOps, cloud IT. They know some stuff about details about DataKitchen, security. And in this role, Chris is actually going to be playing 2 roles, and sometimes organizations will have more than one. He's going to be a pre-production tester as well. So he's both a DataOps engineer and playing a production tester. And so what's the challenge here? Well, in a lot of organizations, this is a the coordination between these people is a multi-step, multi-person, multi-environment, technical environment process to make a request a reality. And so the challenge that these people have is that they live in a world where, for instance, a VP of marketing could make a request to that data and analytics team. I want to see some new data on profitability as soon as possible. And so what does that mean? How would they go in and be able to get data on profitability as soon as possible? Well, there's a lot of challenges in organizations. How do you leverage the best practice so you don't create everything from the start? How do you reuse the work that's done? How do you just collaborate and coordinate the work between these 3 people? They may be in the same office, but they may not be directly next to each other. And then how do you ease the movement kind of between team members and between tools in their environments? How do you maintain security? And then just how do you automate this work and reduce errors so it's not a bunch of checklists, a bunch of tasks? And that's one of the DataOps principles, is that you can, if you're doing work, any repetitive work, automate it. Because that reduces errors and also gives time to more people to create value. And so in this world, there's also a further complication because there's 2 environments. There's a production environment and a development environment. And so Eric, the production engineer, is in charge of that production environment. And think of it as it's separate hardware and software. It's secure. In this case, there's no access to developers. It's managed by Eric and his team. From our DataKitchen, there's a separate agent that runs in it. And there's a separate vault. And if you remember, a vault is a way to store username and passwords in a secure place. There's a separate vault. And if you also remember that we abstract environments out into kitchens. And so there's a production kitchen that has this. And then there's another environment that's development, and it also has separate hardware and software. Hopefully that's close to what is like in development. It's also secure, but it has access by data engineers, data scientists, analysts, DataOps engineers. And Chris is kind of the person who sets up those environments. They have a separate agent and also a separate Vault credential score. And then there's a separate kitchen for it. And so sometimes organizations will have not just production and development, but they'll have production, they'll have pre-production, they'll have UAT, QA, development. And so we're simplifying it a bit because think of it as production and development. And development could be pre-production, UAT, et cetera. But just for simplification, we're going to do these two. And from a technical standpoint, we're going to show AWS. And so in this case, there's a bunch of, there's a what we call a release environment or an environment, a technical environment where they work. And so in this case, it could be, this could be Azure, this could be on-prem, it really doesn't matter. And these are just representative tools. And so in production and in development, we have a separate agent, and those are running on both separate servers. And there's something called a VPC, a virtual private cloud, which is sort of a way to put a secure loop around a bunch of servers in Amazon. And in there's a SFTP server that has a file on it that we're going to use to do that profitability analysis. And then there's a database, we're using Amazon's Redshift, that's in the production. And there's Amazon's S3, which is a bucket store. There's a Docker and a Python, a Docker hub, where we keep track of some images. And then even we have a separate Slack channel for any production alerts, along with a separate email address. And likewise in development, they've got their own agent, they've got their own SFTP server, they've got their own Amazon Redshift, it's wrapped in a development, a VPC, and they've got their own Docker hub, their own place in S3, and you can kind of see that these curly brackets are sort of the way we parameterize them, and then their own Slack channel. And so when you do your work in development, what you want to do is easily transfer that work into production. So number one, you've got to have a set of services that you work with. And so there's got to be this sort of hardware, software running. And then number two, you want to sort of use and abstract the naming and the security of all these services so that you have the pointers to those services. You can have the same type of pointer, they just point at different places between development and production. And so that's actually a lot of what Chris's job to do as a DataOps engineer. How do you abstract the environment? How do you make sure that I can move things easily between one place and the other? And this is purely representative. We have a lot of different tools in a lot of different places. And so this is a pretty simple case where we're just building a database. Other cases could have data science tools and visualization tools, and we covered that in our last demo where we showed a pretty complicated tool chain where there was people with data scientists using R, and in this case there was a Jupyter Notebook and Pentaho and Tableau and a whole different tool chain. But in this case, we're just going to stick to a pretty simple tool chain because we really want to focus on the changing of environments. And so how does that look in our software? So, and this is the last slide. Eric is really in charge of production, and there's a demo production environment that Eric is kind of in charge of. Chris is going to set up a kitchen to work in. And then NoProd is going to work in her own kitchen, do the work, and then we're going to watch how that's promoted up into production. So let's start that. Again, the goal is to satisfy the VP of marketing. I want to see this new data on profitability. We've got these three people who we've got to coordinate. They sort of work in separate environments and have separate goals in life. And we're going to walk through our product on how to do that. So the first thing that we need to do is to get Chris to be able to set up that environment. And so we're going to switch back and forth between different environments. And we have a place that we use at DataKitchen to store credentials. And so I'm just going to log in by using that stored credentials. And so I'm logged in as Chris now. And so Chris sees a bunch of kitchens. There's some in marketing production, some in template production. There's a separate demo development production. But since I'm logged in as Chris, I want to create an environment for my team to work. And so, Chris has got some skills in Amazon. He can do some different things, but he's got to create a kitchen for that to work. And in creating a kitchen, you can, DataKitchen can help you turn on servers, turn off servers. But in other cases, people have different ways. They have servers that are already existing. They have environments that are already set up. They have VPCs. And there's a whole bunch of sort of DevOpsy work that organizations already have some degree of handles on. And we can run the scripts that they do it. But in this case, we're going to assume that this environment's up and running. And so that it helps simplify it, but also that these servers, this development environment is already up and running. And we're not really showing the actual creation of that from scratch. What we are showing is that this development environment's running, and then Chris has got to set up a kitchen for the team to work. And in some cases, like this demo dev kitchen, there could be multiple people working. There could be people like Eric and Carlos and Arthi. They're all working on this in this particular demo dev kitchen, and they're working on their own code branch. They're merging back up. They're sharing, and then that demo dev could actually then get up into production. But we're going to create a separate environment for that. So to do that, I'm going to create a child kitchen. There's a bunch of aspects to creating a kitchen, but the first and most important is to actually give it a name. I'm just going to call it feature dev, because that's a pretty good name. I've given an option to create a schema, and I can't actually create a schema in this because I haven't pointed my environment. I don't know what I'm going to run in. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to pick all my recipes. And then I've got a way to configure my vault. And a vault is really a way to help us capture all the username and passwords. And so someone has to put these into Vault. And again, this is Chris's job, and there's to put these in. And so I'm pointing to a separate vault and a separate service that creates and stores all those credentials that Chris has filled. And I do that, again, I've got the credentials in my one pass, and I'm going to actually get the name of the vault service into it. And then I'm going to go and get the password into that. And then I need to have the prefix to the vault path. And then I need to make sure that this is inheritable, so every kitchen below this can actually pick it up. And then I hit Complete Wizard. So I have a mistake here. So I made a mistake. I need to copy this again. So I need to go and copy. And hit Complete Wizard. So I go to my kitchen list, and I've configured a kitchen that I can then now go and do my work in, or I can have team members go and use that as a development work. And so I'm going to click into that and hit next. And so this has got all the recipes that are in production. And I have one here that's a special recipe. It's called Test Released Environment. So I'm going to hit Test and then hit Next. And I'm going to run that variation. And what this one does is it actually goes in and says, hey, is everything set up for me? Can I actually run in this one? And I know for a fact that this is going to fail because every recipe's got an abstraction. It's got alerts, it's got a Docker Hub configuration, it's got, and it actually tells what release environment. And I don't want to run in the production, I want to run in the dev. So I know this is going to fail. So I'm going to hit run and go off and do that. I'm going to hit close, and then I can see an order. And now I can see that that had an error in the order run. And if I go into that, I can look at that order and I can see where the error is. And so it's the very first node that worked. And so my release environment is not set up correctly for this. So I have to go do that. And to do that, I've got to go into my kitchen. It's on the upper left, and I've got to hit this little wrench here to configure it. And I've got some things I have to configure. So the first thing I have to do is to be able to go in and so the first thing I have to do is add the user. I've had to add noprod into this kitchen. So I just want to make sure I've got the name right. So I'm going to copy this name, and then I'm going to add this user so that they have access to this kitchen, and hit update. And then I've got to make sure that this kitchen actually points to the right release environment, the right DataKitchen agent. And so instead of prod, I'm going to make it dev and hit update. And if you remember, what that means is, going back to our screen here, we've got implementation prod and implementation dev that have been set up already. And so we're just pointing to the different version. And then I need to actually describe the set of services. So you've got these 6 things that we saw in the picture here. I need to describe those and make sure that the kitchen has the representation of that release environment. And we do that by what we call overrides. And so if you look at the values in these right now, so for instance, this one says DK implementation production. I need to go in and replace these values and make them so that they're available to the ones that point to development. So for instance, the release environment, its name is prod, but I actually should name it dev. And this Slack channel that I'm going to do, it has a bunch of Slack pointers in, but I don't want to send it to production because Eric, our production master, gets really upset when he gets a bunch of Slack messages that go out and say, oh, here's what's happening in development. He doesn't care. He just cares about what's in production. So we have to replace those values. And so the way that works is I have to go in and take these values and replace them. So I'm going to go off and do that now. I'm going to pause and you'll see the results. So me acting as Chris, the DataOps engineer, just made these changes. And so this is now, the alerts are now pointing to the implementation channel and the implementation email in Slack. And we've got our SFTP config, our Redshift config, all pointing at the right way. So I hit update, and now I've got this kitchen that's configured correctly for my release environment. I added my users. I have the right configuration that points to my set of servers in that release environment, and I'm pointing to the right agent. And so if I go back to look at my list of recipes in this kitchen, I'll be able to run my test to release environment successfully. So if I hit run variation, it gives me again some of the attributes of running this variation in this test recipe. Here's the alerts. It's pointing to those alerts. It's pointing to the, instead of pointing to the development one, it's production one is pointing to the dev one. And so there's a different set of variables that are overriding and running this recipe that tell us what's happening and what the release environment is. So we can see that this order is now running, and we should be able to get it to run correctly because the release environment's set. So let's watch and see what happens. So this successfully completed. My release environment's ready because I was able to just grab and put a file into Redshift. And again, it's a simple environment. I was able to run a whole series of tests, and I've got some interesting additional logging. Like this is telling me a bunch of things that I can use to understand. So I can understand where things are working, I can understand logs, and then I can look at all the tests that were passed. And we can see that everything works. And even in our order runs, we keep track of all the logs across all the systems so we can understand what's going on. So now I've created this kitchen, as Chris, which is set up to be my work environment to do this feature. Now, like I said before, there could be multiple places that I want to work on this feature. This is also a Git branch in addition to a release environment. And so Chris's job is done. He's created the release environment. It's ready to go. And now we're going to switch. And it's not going to be Chris doing the work, but it's actually going to be this woman named NoProd. And she's going to have to go off and get this profitability data created into the database. So to do that, I'm going to actually go in and log out as Chris, and then log in through the magic of my password manager as a separate person. And so I'm logging in now. If you look at the upper right, I'm logged in as no prod, and they have to work within the feature development kitchen. And so what's good about this is like, well, how would that person know what kitchen to work in? Well, what we've done in our software is to take every URL and give it a unique path. So that way they can go in. And so there's a unique URL that points to this feature. And so if you want to put that in your Jira ticket or put it in your whatever workflow tool, saying, Chris would complete the ticket and say, here's the feature development kitchen that no prod should do to go to work. Likewise, if they work on certain recipes, they can point to everyone has a nice URL format that they can work on. So no prod's got to do this task. But the first thing is, she's skeptical and then says, does this release environment work? So she wants to run that test release environment just to make sure it's all working and up to par. So she's going to hit run, but she can't do that because she's actually got to create that place to work. So this is her feature development, but she's got to create a kitchen for her to do that work because she wants to work not in development. She wants her own Git branch. So she's going to go and create a child kitchen from that. And so she's going to name this as the no prod feature kitchen. She's going to hit next. And now she wants to create a place to do her work that other people don't see. And so there's lots of different ways that you can create places to work, but since the server's already running, she's just going to create a schema, which is a partition in a database that says this is my private place to do work. And it's actually going to be named after her kitchen. So in the database, there will be a kitchen called that. So if I hit next, she's going to select all the recipes. I hit next, and she's going to not use the default, but inherit all the things from the parent kitchen. So all that configuration that Chris, the DataOps engineer, has set up for her, she's just going to inherit. So she doesn't have to worry about what servers are there or how to configure it, because the set of variables and the abstractions in our kitchens and the DataKitchen recipes handle that burden for her. And so we hit complete wizard, and so now the Git branch is created, and that kitchen is going to be go off and be created. So if you go to the kitchen list, she can now see that she can work in her no prod feature kitchen. And so all she has to do is click into that kitchen, and she can see that all the recipes are there, and she can run her favorite test release environment recipe to actually prove that this kitchen is working. And then go in and hit run. And then you can also see again that the alerts are pointing to the implementation Slack channel, not at the production Slack channel. So hit run. So I can see in my order run list that this kind of testing was for no prod was good, and she was able to run through all the steps in her recipe. And now she's ready to go and ready to do her work. And so we can go back to the recipe list. And one way to see it is that since she's working in the scope of databases, she'll have a database tool of whatever tool that she wants. And that's a bedrock principle of DataKitchen that you should use. If you like ETL tools, you should use those. If you like plain old SQL tools, you should use those. And if we go look at the list of there's a database list here in my PyCharms tool, and I can go kind of drill into it and see which ones are there. I can see that I've created a kitchen called the No Prod Development Kitchen, and that's the same name as the kitchen that we're currently in. Yeah, actually, I had to hit refresh, and here it is. We're actually not in No Prod Dev Kitchen, we're in No Prod Feature Kitchen. So the schema is where she's going to be able to do all her work. And so now she's at a choice. How do I actually do my work? And there's two ways that DataKitchen provides ways to share and reuse. And one of them is sort of by copy. We provide and can create template recipes that you can reuse. And the other is by reference, and we have something called an ingredient where we can call by a name a group of one or more DataKitchen nodes that we call a variation, and give that a name and call it by reference. And then every time the recipe runs, we don't incorporate the code and the configuration, we just call it by reference. And then even then when it runs, we can make sure that it uses all the tests, and if it's already run in a certain period of time, we don't you don't have to rerun it. And so you either use templates, and so I'm going to go in and first of all create a template and then show you an ingredient. So here's a template that we're going to use. And so this is a template recipe. It's got 2 variations in it, and what we're going to do is actually clone this template. So I'm going to go in and duplicate it. And this is I'm just going to call it my no prod feature, because this is the one that we're going to be working on. So I'm going to hit add. And so because I'm in my Git branch, I'm in my own no prod kitchen. This is all safe. If I screw up, I can delete it. But here's the no prod feature. And this is actually, I'm not interested in the one that's full, so I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to hit delete. And I'm really interested in this partial one. And, in the interest, this is a demo, so some things are already done. And I can see that there's a couple steps. When I look at the different node types, I can also see that what are the components of it, the different types. And I can also, what's really interesting, the number of tests, because at DataKitchen we believe tests are really important. So I've created this template recipe that does a bunch of different things. And so the problem is that this is a template and doesn't have enough information to actually run. So if I hit run variation, this is gonna error. This is gonna not work. So I have to actually go into my recipe and kind of set up the configuration. And as a shorthand, we are going to give a very simple way to do this. And I've created a bunch of variables, like what's the name of the table that we're supposed to create in this recipe, right? And it's blank here. There is no table. And that's going to cause it not to work. Another way to look at this is, instead of from a form, you can look at it from a source code view. And you can see that there's no table here. And so what I'm going to do is actually go ahead and just fill this out, and this is going to actually make the recipe run. So I've gone and filled this out, and here you can see that there's some SQL. Here's the table name that's filled out. So all I have to do, again, is hit update. And I should, because I'm in my kitchen, I go back to the recipe list, and now I'm able to go in and see the changes in this recipe and hit run. And I should be able to successfully run this sort of template chunk of recipe. What that person has to do then, I'm going to hit run, is be able to start making changes into the work that they want to do. And so what does that look like? Whether they would use their favorite tool to edit the SQL, they would then go in and into the recipe itself and start editing for instance, some SQL that's called. So for instance, we have a set of resource files that they use. And one of those resource files is that file that actually does the work. So it's like, for instance, this calculate profit.sql. Here I'm going to edit it. And they would be able to go in and write their SQL. They could use their favorite tool, like my PyCharms tool here, to do it, and then create their work and add it into the recipe. And so let's look here, and I want to be able to check to see that this is running. I'm going to go back to my order list, and I can see that this on-demand partial graph variation ran successfully. So that's great. I was able to run this template recipe by changing a few configuration settings. I made a few changes, and you can see that this runs, and it came with a bunch of test results that we saw before. And so I've got this template that I can start doing my work on as no prod, and that's a good thing. So what would that work look like? Well, again, in the interest of making this as simple as possible, I want to add in some reusable nodes. And so I want to add a node into this recipe, and I can kind of configure different nodes, a data map or a container, or I can use an existing node as a template. And I've got this one called an ingredient node. And so I'm going to add that in. That's that logger, and that's you've seen that in a lot of the recipes in this demo. I'm just going to add it in. And then I need to connect it to the recipe. So I add edge, and then I connect it up into the recipe. And so here is this ingredient node. And then I'm just going to quick save it. And if I look at this ingredient, it's special because I'm going to drill into it. And what it does is it actually goes off and calls another chunk of recipe. And so what this does is it calls, and a simple way to look at that is it calls another provider recipe. So it calls this provider recipe and calls this ingredient within a recipe. So it can call another recipe and another variation. So I've added that feature in to the recipe. And so I can see that that's there, and I've got this new variation. I've added it in, and I've got the bunch of tests, and I want to add in the last one. In this case, I'm just going to, this is not an ingredient, I'm just going to add an existing node that does that Python pandas transformation. I'm going to hit add. This is already prepared. It's got 4 tests. I'm going to add the edge. I'm going to select the source, and then the target. And so we've added this 4th node in, and I'm going to save it. So if I go in and look at this Python node, this pandas node, I can see that it actually has a Python script embedded in it. And so this is a cool Python script. It does some stuff, but it works just like the way all our other nodes do. There's it runs in a Docker Cub, and you can see here's the configuration that references what Docker container we're running. And we pull out some data and we do some tests against it. So here's like a warning test that runs every time this Python Docker container runs. And it warns that the total profit calculation from a Python SQL scripts are different. So it does a test. And so we've got tests all across our system. So if I go back and look at that recipe from the top, I can see that there's 5 nodes, but I've got a bunch of different tests. And we at DataKitchen think of tests in different groups. There's tests that actually look at sort of the size and shape of data, more like a data quality test. Does it have the right number of rows? Does it have the right number of columns? Kind of looking at it from like a, what's the point in time view of this data? Is it right as a rectangle, and does it have the right columns? And there's lots of ways that we can write that test. And then we also look at another set of tests, and here I can see all the steps in it and all the keys in it. It's called a location balance test. And what's happening in a lot of data systems is data comes from somewhere, like an SFTP site, it gets into S3, maybe it gets into Redshift, and you've got to make sure that you sort of follow the bouncing balls and the counts. And here's a case where we are able to go in and make sure that there is the right number of steps in each step. So actually that was not in that node, so I'm going to go to the SFTP to S3, and I'm going to find out that way to do a balance between 2 nodes, a location balance. And in this case, I'm trying to test that the data actually transferred from an SFTP site to S3 correctly. And the way we write a test is stop on error if the row count location balance test fails. And it's simple as we represent the row counts with different variables, and is the S3 specified row count equal to the SFTP specified row count. And it's as simple as writing this simple expression. And these numbers are actually come out of the way that we interact with the system. And so that follow the bouncing ball, that location balance test is also a very appropriate way to go in. And then looking at other parts of this recipe, we can go in and see that there's ways that we want to represent what business users use, the business idea. And so that can be done in a lot of different ways, but one way that we can do that in our system in this demo is to show that do we have the product categories have an in-value account, because sometimes your data provider may add a new, that they may have 3 or 4 product categories, but they want to add one in later. And so here's a warning on improper product categories. So it says, warn if there are any rows in the sales table with value other than office supplies, furniture, or technology. And this is one of the reasons that we encourage our customers to have these business-oriented tests is we've done enough analytics work as a team that when you put a chart in front of a business user, there's cases that within 2 or 3 seconds they know it's wrong. And the reason is they've got a view of the world that's based on these 80-20 rules, and which is heavily influenced by categories. And if there a new category showed up, it can throw off all the sales counts, and they can see that very immediately. Likewise, if we do something called a historical balance, where we check office supplies versus over time, and that's another type of test. And so we can do that test. Likewise, we want to also do what's called statistical process control. So like warn if the row count is less than the running average, warn if the profit is greater than the running average. And so what that means is we're doing counts over time to make sure that after week in and week out, there's no sudden anomaly or change in these values over time. And that's another way to get ahead and make sure that your customers don't find your errors, but you do. And so let's go in and test this recipe because it's all the pieces are there, all the 5 steps, and she's done her work. She's created her code. She's added in this profitability transformation on some new data, so she's going to hit run variation. And so again, it's all the attributes that are associated with this release environment in this kitchen. I'm going to hit run. So we can see that this order run is active. We can look at the timings. We can look at other metadata about it running. And we can see that it starts off with no test results. And then as test goes on, more test and more information is created as the recipe is running. And that's another sort of philosophy of DataKitchen, that as the system's running, you should be able to make sensors on what's going on. So for instance, stop on error, SFTP count. It's another test, because like in a production line, you want to find out if your errors as early as possible. And so as this graph is running down, as each one of these steps is going, you can actually see the amount of tests that pass that increase, and you can keep seeing it add over time. And so, like a good factory assembly line, you should give the ability to monitor every step of the way, create statistics on what's happening, so then you can improve the processing time. Likewise, give sort of a virtual andon cord to stop the line, and that we call those tests or monitors. And so we can see that all these steps have correctly worked, and the Python one is done. And so now our NoProd, our engineers, got a working system, got a working feature. So how do we get that working feature up from this kitchen that she's working in all the way back to the feature development, back into production? And so that's really about the collaboration between these people, between NoProd, who's done the work, and now it's got to go back to Chris in the scenario. And maybe there could be, like I said, there could be other environments. There could be a UAT environment, a test environment, etc. There's other environments, but we want to pass it back to Chris. And Chris wants to be able to take that and actually add the scheduling to it and do some inspection to make sure it's right and run it one time to make sure that it works, and then push it back up to Eric as the production engineer. So NoProd's got to go into our software and actually do a merge. And so before she does a merge, she just wants to merge down to make sure that no one who's working in some other kitchen has got any changes that she has to get. And so that's good. She went in and did that. She did the merge down. And now she's want to take it and merge up. And so this gives a list of all the changes, all the new things that were added, all these new files. And there's a lot of them because she used a template. And I'm going to hit next, and it's going to actually do a merge for me. And so if there's a conflict in the merge, we have and this most likely is not going to be because we just used a template, all the results are okay, we can pop up a 3-panel UI to help you work through that merge. hit next. And we've got all these order runs that happened in it. And in some cases, it's good to keep track of these statistics, but this is just a development environment. We don't need to keep any history. So I'm going to hit next, and then I'm going to hit complete wizard. And so now what's happened is all that work that NoProd did is now available to Chris in that feature kitchen. So if I go back to the kitchen list, I can see that all that work is now in the feature list. And so the last thing that NoProd wants to do is just shut it down, because she doesn't need that space in the database anymore. And so she doesn't care about the order runs, promotions. And also we give her the option to actually delete the schema, delete that sort of partition in the database. So that way it's not around, it doesn't exist anymore. And that's a good thing, so it kind of saves on some resources. So she hits complete wizard, and that NoProd feature kitchen, that schema in the database is going ahead and being deleted. And so and also behind the scenes, we're actually deleting the kitchen from the list of available kitchens. So if I go back to the kitchen list, now we can see that there is no NoProd kitchen list. So now, NoProd's sort of done her job. Built the coding, done some tests, made sure that it works. Now we have to switch from her account back to Chris and log out. And so Chris is our DataOps engineer, if you remember, and he's kind of doing a bit of double duty. He's acting both as a DataOps engineer and he's acting as kind of our pre-release engineer. So, oops, I actually have to log out first. And then Chris has got to log in, so I'm logging in as Chris. And so you can see in the upper right, it's Chris. They could, again, use Jira, use a phone call, whatever person-to-person workflow tool they manage. But Chris has got to go into that feature development kitchen and do two things. One, he's got to just make sure that it works. So he's going to go into that NoProd feature kitchen and just run it to make sure it runs in that the work that was done by NoProd is correct. They just have to do this. You can go in and she could give, again, links to the actual recipe, links to the order run to prove that it works. And so you can have these artifacts that can save time. And the way that we get those artifacts is by pointing to them by specific URLs. So if I go into this and I click on this order run, I can actually share this specific order run data with people and say, okay, here's the URL that represents that order run. So this will run correctly because that's where we were. And Chris has got to do something interesting. He's actually got to add timing because this is an on-demand. He wants to be able to schedule it to run. So to do that, we have a way to create variations. And variations are, since a recipe is a bunch of nodes, we can then run a lot of times the front nodes, a separate set of separate nodes, or we can just run the whole thing. And so I'm going to create a separate variation here. To do that, I've got to edit my recipe. And I've got a way to look at the number of variations we have in that recipe. So I go to variations. And I can see I've got one, so I'm just going to go in and copy it. But before then, I've got to add some timing to it. And I've got different timings. On demand, it runs 3 times in a row. Or here's one that runs 5 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time daily. And so we've got a scheduler that's embedded in our system, and some companies like to use it. Some companies have their own scheduler, they can use it. But it's a repeating schedule every day starting at 5 a.m. Eastern Time. There's a number of limits. And then also there's some RAM and disk that can be associated with it. So it doesn't really matter when you're sending code and doing your work in a database, but if you're doing some work where you're processing big files from SFTP, you're doing some Python work, you want to make sure that your container has enough space to run. So this is the schedule that we're going to use, and we could create a new one, but that daily 5 a.m. looks good. So I'm going to just create a new variation in my UI. So I'm going to create a new variation. I'm going to do that by cloning the existing variation, and I'm going to call this the scheduled feature. And it's going to run, instead of on demand, it's just going to run at 5 a.m. And I'm going to update. And so that actually adds a new variation. Going to run the full graph. It's going to run at 5 a.m. It's going to inherit all the other things that are associated with this recipe. So let's double check again that this ran. And of course it ran correctly. That's awesome. I've added the scheduling in. Now Chris is then could go in and look at this recipe, do some kind of code checks to see if the code's right, if he happens to be that way, look at the number of tests in the recipes to see that it's right, and be able to then kind of provide a last minute QA and sort of governance to make sure that everything's done right. Provided he does that, we can then have him go in and merge that work so it's available then in production for our Eric, our production meister, to release. And so he's got to merge that down. So this one actually says, I want to merge demo production down to feature development to make sure anything changed. And great, there's nothing changed. But we've got to actually merge this up. So I want to go merge this feature up. That means I want to take that code, just like we saw before, all these changes. I want to then add them to the production branch. And so, again, we're not copying and pasting things. We're able to make this work because we've got one common Git repository across all the different environments. And we've also abstracted our environment by our appropriate kitchen definition, and variable creations and vaults to make sure that that all works. I don't really care about the order runs because I'm going to rerun it and then in Complete Wizard. And so now in whatever workflow tool that you normally use, you can update the Jira ticket and say, okay, here's a new feature ready to release. And so now Chris, I'm going to log out, and Chris has done his job. And now Eric's actually got to go put it into production. And he wants to minimize errors, so he can actually go in and look and see is there tests, see if it ran, see the artifacts that have been created along the way. And then Chris, all Chris would have to do is go log into the product, or Eric, excuse me. All Eric would have to do would be to log into the product. And here I'm going to log in as Eric using my handy password manager. And Eric's going to be able to log in. And so he's going to say, oh, there's this feature development kitchen. It's all ready to go. I've got this new no prod feature in my kitchen. And all I have to do is be able to click this on the scheduled feature. And it says 5 a.m. daily, run every time, and hit run. And therefore, it's scheduled to run every time. The alerts go to the right place. Everything goes to the right place. And so he doesn't end up getting for instance, a Slack message. And here's the case where we've got implementation errors that says something's wrong. Or it gets implementation alerts that says something's right. So for instance, here's a case where a Slack message that we get out to everyone saying, here's what's happening, this recipe ran, everything's great, and you can be able to go look at what's going on. It has links to the orders and the order runs, etc. And so that's a great way to communicate, as well as done through email. So let me conclude this demo so far. And the challenge that we wanted to show in this demo is one of the main aspects of DataOps. How do you just get a team to work together that's got different release environments and different people? And our perspective on this is there's lots of tools to help people collaborate. You can call people up. You can use great tools like Jira. But unless you've done a few things, one is that you've built an abstraction of your environments from a security standpoint, from a tool chain standpoint, from a networking and standpoint. That's the first part. And you don't want to have to, and why is it necessary to do that? Because you want to minimize the amount of rekeying. You want things to work very easily as you move from one environment to other. And you saw that happen in our demo. We set up an abstraction of the release environments across each place, and we did that by using kitchen variables. So I think kitchens represent release environments, and they also represent the Git branches. And so our persons did the work in that different release environment. And so what you saw is that NoProd did her work in this development kitchen in the release environment of the demo dev. And then that was merged back up into production. So there's two things that have to be kind of linked together. The tools that you orchestrate, that's your recipe, and your release environments, and your Git branch, and your security all have to work together. And so that's what makes DataOps, that sort of coordinating that dance between your systems and tools and tests and orchestration is really what makes this work. And that operational task is in a lot of organizations falls to kind of the behind. And a lot of people do it manually. They don't give much attention to it. And we think the true value is of doing DataOps is you've got to do those two things. You've got to keep all your code in one place in Git. You've got to abstract your release environments, and then you've got to orchestrate all the tools in your tool chains with tests so that they can move quickly through each release environment. And then we can actually solve these problems of how to leverage best practices, how to collaborate and coordinate work, how to ease movement between environments, etc. And there's a lot more other demos that we have that talk about how to do this kind of between organizations, inter-team coordination. And that kind of give a quick preview is a lot of organizations have two teams. They'll have a home office team and a self-service team. That home office team may use one set of tools. In this case, it's SQL Server. In this case, it's Alteryx and Tableau. One may be in Boston, one may be in New Jersey. But there's a lot of challenges when you have this distributed team. One, for instance, is like what happens if the database team makes a change in a database? How can you tell if those reports are going to break? Likewise, if the local office team adds a new data set, how does it get made available for all? In a lot of cases, the local office team may change report calculations, but like in Tableau has it, they may copy the report. And so that same calculation has 10 or 15 different copies. So how do you know that it's not consistent? And then finally, just how do you collaborate? If you're going to have some new data in a schema, how do you have a new update and report, and how do you make sure that all works? And so that's our point of collaboration. And it reuses this idea of recipes, that each team can kind of have their own group of recipes or group of variations that they can work with. And that those variations themselves can be put together and orchestrated together. So you can have teams working independently, owning each one of their piece of the puzzle, but they can run together to make sure that everyone knows that the home office team has visibility, that they're not breaking anything on the self-service team. And so we can then have that scenario where, just like before, the VP of marketing, who's very aggressive, wants to have some new changes into the target accounts, and that can then work with the local office team and then push that back up into production. And so that way of working between teams, between multiple teams and multiple locations, is something that the DataKitchen platform provides. And so those are the two aspects of coordination: intra-team coordination, which is what we showed in the demo, and then just in slides we showed the inter-team coordination. And so that's it. I hope you have a good day. Thanks for listening and watching.